Alright folks, welcome to Stu's Garage. Today we're going to be working on the Drift Fox again. I know we haven't worked on this car in a while, but it's time for it to go under the knife a little bit. So pretty much for today's video, we're going to be changing out the cam. The reason I'm changing this cam is because right now the car has a cam in it that I don't actually know what it is. It's a long story behind that, but it is what it is. I'm not very happy with it, and I'm going for another version of the cam that I had originally in the engine that was originally in this car. I've had this cam sitting on a shelf for a long time. I'd kind of made up my mind that I really wanted to focus on driving this year. The car is finally solid and stable, and I just wanted to drive it and be able to drive it since I missed out on a lot because the car was down for various reasons last year. But since everybody's afraid of the boogeyman, there's no events going on, and I don't know when the next event is going to be, so I might as well start working on the car again. So I've been psyching myself up for this very intense cam swap job that could have been a lot of work for me. As some of you may know, if you work on engines, for an LS engine, the lifters reside underneath the heads. So in order to change the cam, normally you would have to pull basically the entire top end off. You got to pull the rockers out. You got to pull the heads off. Then you got to pull the front end off. You know, pull everything out from inside the front end, change your cam, and then put everything back together. And that's a lot because you're essentially stripping this engine down to a short block, taking everything off of it, and then putting it back on. It's just a pain in the butt, but that's the way it is. On a Ford engine, it's not quite as bad because your lifters don't sit underneath the heads. They kind of sit underneath the intake, so you can get those out of the way without pulling the heads off and without doing head gaskets. But anyways, while I was buying parts, I kind of saw clues that you could actually do that without doing most of that work. So today we're going to show you a shortcut of how you can actually change your cam without pulling your heads, which means the only thing we're going to have to do is just pull off our front accessories, and we'll be able to accomplish that with very low risk. Now, just because it's a shortcut doesn't necessarily mean we're cutting corners. This should be a safe way of doing this, and I'll explain the nuances to that as we get to it. So normally, if I had to pull the heads off and everything, I'd probably take an entire week just to do that. With me doing this shortcut method, I could really accomplish this job in one night. I'm probably not going to do that. I'll probably stretch this out over the weekend, just because I don't want to spend 6-7 hours here in the garage working and rushing and things like that, but that's my choice. So before we get into this, I'll just summarize what needs to happen in order for this job to get done. At some point, you're probably going to see the intake come off of the car. It's not necessary, but while I'm doing this, I do actually need to change my intake gaskets, so the intake is going to come off. We're going to need to pull the coil packs. We're going to have to pull the valve covers, and we have to pull the rockers out because the rockers press down on the push rods, which press down on the lifters, which are going to be in the way. So anyways, we got to pull all of that stuff. It's very minimal. We're going to have to pull all of our front accessories. We're going to have to disconnect the intake. We're going to have to drain the radiator, and we're going to have to pull the radiator out. And the purpose of that is just because the cam is pretty long, and we need to have space to actually be able to pull that out. All right, as for supplies that we're going to be doing on this job, these are my intake seals. You're not going to see me do that because there's no point. This is your cam thrust plate right here. This is a $12 part, folks. Most people don't change them, but I highly recommend changing these. These have a seal right here that can actually go bad. It's a one-time use part, and if this piece goes bad on you because you reused it, you're going to lose oil pressure, and that can cause catastrophic failure in your engine. So go ahead and spend $12, get yourself a new cam thrust plate whenever you're going in there messing with the cam or anything like that. As you can see here, we've got head gaskets. I purchased these before I realized the shortcut method, so we're going to go ahead and put these on the shelf. I'm probably going to end up using those on the spare engine, but who knows? I mean, anytime if I have to work on pulling the heads in the future, I'm going to need these, so I'm going to put these on the shelf. Got the new cam sitting right there, and these guys are the specialized tool that's going to save me money from buying head gaskets and other things and doing a whole lot of work. head gaskets, head bolts, all of that stuff. This right here is the reason why the heads don't have to come off. So I'll show you how to use those as soon as we get into this thing. All right, folks, so we've gone ahead and we've pulled off all the front accessories that we have to on this particular setup. We didn't have to mess with the alternator on this one. All we had to do was pull off the water pump. And as you can see, the water pump contains a thermostat and the idler pulley. That's just on this particular setup. Other setups may differ if you have a power steering pump or other things, but mine is as simple as possible. And I didn't have to mess with other stuff, as you can see. I've already done the intake gaskets. I didn't show you guys that, but for the purpose of this video, the intake is still on there. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to have to remove our rockers. The reason why we're removing these rockers is because whichever valve is being pushed down is actually putting pressure on the lifters, which is putting pressure on the cam. And you know, these things are like 500-pound springs. So if I was to try, first of all, I wouldn't be able to pull the cam out with it. But if I did somehow manage to pull the cam out, it would just shoot the lifter down into the block. And that would not be good, because then the engine would have to come out and come apart. So in order to relieve the pressure off of the cam, we're going to pull all of these rockers off. So one of the cool features about the LS motor, if you guys haven't seen this before, is the rockers all ride on this rail. I don't know what this rail is called, but it's similar to like a pedestal rocker setup. So you don't have to tighten these things down and shim them and make sure that, you know, clock them and all of that stuff. You just, you slap them on there, you bolt them to the correct torque spec, and they're good to go. So pretty much installing these things is super easy. All right, now that we've got our rockers pulled off, the next thing that we're going to do here is we're actually going to time the motor, do the cam timing, or whatever you want to call it. You could do this before or after, it doesn't matter, but I'm going to go ahead and do this beforehand. Basically, there's a dot right here on this timing gear, and that's going to point to another dot down on the, I think it's actually on the crankshaft. It's going to be pretty much impossible for you guys to see with the oil pump on here. Normally you would do this with the oil pump off. But in order to remove the oil pump, you actually have to pull the oil pan, and that's impossible to do with the motor in the car. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this thing over until I get these dots lined up, and then we're going to go ahead and remove the timing chain and sprocket. Alright, so I've got this thing timed. It's really difficult to see, but you actually can see it if you know what you're looking for. So this is the mark on the timing gear, and then right down there, the little dot that you see right above my finger is the mark on the crankshaft, sprocket thingy, whatever you want to call that. And those two just have to be pointing at each other. That way when we pull the cam out, we know exactly how to put the cam back in. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and pull off our sprocket. let the timing gear just kind of fall down like that. Alright folks, so this is where the cheat code comes into play. What you see me doing right here is I'm actually inserting a couple of screws into the cam. This is the cam right here. And the reason I'm putting these screws in is to help me get a better grip. Because what we're going to do is we're going to spin the cam over a few times to try and push all the lifters up. So hopefully these lifters are being pushed up into the lifter trays. That's actually one of the purposes of the lifter trays. They're supposed to hold the lifters in place so that you can do this. But that's not very trustworthy, because if I was to pull this cam out right now, one of those lifters would go right into the oil pan, and then we have to take the whole thing out of the car. So in order to prevent that from happening, we've got these two holes right here. And this is actually what supplies oil to your lifters. That's where you get your oil pressure from. So basically these run straight down the engine. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our dowels, which I have right here. I've gone ahead and rounded off the edges, which you can't see because the camera will not focus. I did that to help it to be easier for them to insert down into the engine without snagging. So basically what these are going to do is they're going to put pressure up against the sides of the lifters and keep the lifters from falling down into the engine. It's actually a really tight fit. I would absolutely hate to break one of these off inside the engine. That'd be absolutely horrible. Okay. Now we've got the lifters locked into place. So the next thing for us to do is to get the cam out of there. Now there are companies that sell a nice special tool that will help you to do this, but today we're just going to use a big fat screwdriver. I'm going to put it in here and gently pull the cam out. Actually, I'm going to pause while I'm doing this and actually prepare the other cam, because we want to put this other cam in here as quickly as possible. Just in case something was to go wrong, we don't want one of those things to fall into the engine. So I'm going to go ahead and lube the other cam and get that ready to go into the engine. Have to do this very slowly and carefully so that you don't knock the cam bearings out of place. It's a little bit tight. You just have to be careful not to force anything. Especially when you got the lifters hanging by a thread. You really don't want one of those going into your oil pan. Alright, the new cam is nice and slimy. Ready to put this thing in. Alright, the most difficult part of this job is over, the most critical part. We've got the cam in there. Everything's pretty much safe at this point. All we got to do is reassemble, so I'm going to let my heart get back to a normal heartbeat, and going to go ahead and finish this job. Alright folks, we're all wrapped up at this point. We got new seals in the intake. We got the cam in, we've got the crank bolt all tightened down. We've got all our fluids added back in. So at this point, we're pretty much ready for our first start. Alright folks, that's going to wrap up this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed this DIY. This is probably the most exciting time-saving and money-saving DIY shortcut that I've found to date working on cars. Like I said in the beginning of this video, this ended up saving me probably a week's worth of work. I went ahead and knocked this thing out in about 2 nights at a leisurely pace, and it probably saved me about $400 worth of materials. So this is, like I said, probably my favorite time-saving DIY that I've found. I want to go ahead and do a video dedication. I'd like to dedicate this video to Steve Cash. I did not know him personally. He's a fellow YouTuber and musician. My wife and I have been watching his YouTube videos for years. He used to make YouTube videos with his cats and his dog. They're just really funny videos. In his last couple of videos, he let on that he was having some issues, some mental health issues. He did take his life via suicide, and that's really unfortunate. So my condolences go out to his family. If you get a second, I would definitely recommend that you go check out his channel. Maybe drop a few likes, a few comments, and let the folks know that he left behind, you know, if you appreciate his work. Suicide is a really unfortunate thing that's happening these days. If you have friends that might be going through something or that are showing you some signs, some irregularities, you know something is up, you know, make sure you reach out to your friends and, you know, check on folks and, you know, do the best that you can to look out for one another. On that note, we're going to go ahead, we're going to wrap up our video, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.